Well, after a few light TWABs over the last few weeks, Bungie was back this week with an absolute banger and a Q&A with the dev team related to weapons. So the team covered loads of stuff for the season, next season, and also beyond as well, even some Lightfall stuff. So that includes buffs, nerfs, perks, new exotics, old exotics, and also plenty more. Well, if you're new around here or find this useful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for all the latest Destiny 2 content and turn on notifications by hitting that bell. Roughly 98% of viewers who watch This Week in Video Games aren't subscribed, so subscribe today and never miss an update. Well, we do have quite a lot to get through today, so strap in, get yourself a snack or maybe a hot drink, and we're going to navigate through all these questions together. Okay, so let's dive over to This Week at Bungie, and we've got the weapon questions and answers with Bungie. And the first question is, when the full auto setting arrives for all weapons, are you still going to keep the full auto trigger system mod as an option? Now, it's kind of nice to have the flexibility without making every weapon full auto. Bungie say, yes, there are no plans to remove it. The full auto trigger system mod is not going away. So what is going to replace the full auto trigger system on exotics that have it as a perk when the new accessibility feature goes live? And they say, well, we don't want to inadvertently make these stronger in PvP, so the goal here is to replace full auto with something fun and thematic and more useful in PvE than PvP. So here's some examples. We got Traveler's Chosen. They replaced full auto trigger system in the Catalyst with Surplus. Got Vigilance Wing, so replaced the full auto trigger system in the Catalyst with Ensemble. And then No Time to Explain, to replace the full auto trigger system with Feeding Frenzy. I did hear the distant groans there of the Destiny community, given No Time to Explain is very, very strong right now. Well, next up we've got a spicy one, and this one is all about Divinity. So they say, note their encounters, they are built around players having access to being able to weaken as many folks have theorised. We don't believe that Divinity in its current form is actually a balance problem. It's not necessarily too strong in isolation, but that being said, Divinity is incredibly dominant in endgame PvE because it trivialises aiming precision weapons and has an extremely high uptime for weaken. The most important issue is that Divinity granting 30% weaken sucks the air out of the room for all other weakened sources, such as Tether and Tractor Cannon, and we don't want the power creep, and we don't want to power creep past Divinity to make them interesting. With this in mind, we've been looking at Divinity for a while now. We've tested a variety of changes in Season 19 over the last few months, landing on reducing Divinity's weaken from 30% to 15%. So I'd really love to hear what you think about the Divinity nerf. Let me know down there in the comments. Okay, so moving on, we've got Kinetic Weapons in PvE, so we're looking at kinetic damage type as opposed to slot. Changes, sometime post Lightfall to make this a more interesting aspect of how the weapon feels. So the question is, what about Adept Raid weapon viability? Well, Bungie says, as it stands, crafted base raid weapons are flat out better than Adept Raid weapons, and we're not happy with this current state, and if changes coming in Lightfall that give the new Lightfall Raid Adept weapons access to enhanced perks. Note, this is not going to be a full freeform crafting. It's a little complex, so please look out for more information to come when we are a little bit closer to the Lightfall release. Next question then, future plans for exotic champion weapons. So we don't have specific plans to add anti-champion mechanic to existing exotic weapons. The goal of the recent additions was to address some obvious holes in the options available, and we're happy with how that worked out. That being said, we are building anti-champion functionality into a new exotic weapon in Season 19 and may revisit other weapons later if we see a need. Next question then, Kingsfall weapons have an unorthodox perk pool. What are the team's feeling about continuing to do this versus making custom raid perks to differentiate endgame rewards? And Bungie say, we have guidelines for how spicy perk pools can be depending on the difficulty of the source of the weapon. For example, Trials Versaris and raid weapons tend to break our standard perk combination rules. The Kingsfall weapons push this to an extreme, and we are evaluating whether they're an actual balance issue, but they do seem okay so far. We intend raid origin traits to make raid weapons feel unique, and we may still make one or two more perks that are exclusive to a new raid. Starting in Season 19, you're going to see a small number of non-raid weapons get access to perks from older raids. Next question, so does Outbreak Perfected truly have persistence, or is it simply a recall setting like any other weapon? Well, Outbreak does not have persistence. That is an old perk from D1. It does have 90 recoil direction where similar weapons are in the 40 to 60 range, but more importantly it recoils like an auto rifle and not a pulse rifle, which is why it feels so unique. This was part of a Destiny 1 bug that we elected to maintain in Destiny 2 reprise of the weapon. Well, next question, the cold denial that Zur sold with the accuracy masterwork, does that actually improve its accuracy? Masterworks provide additional weapon stats to a stat already existing on the weapon. Weapons can't benefit from a stat that they don't have. Only bows have the accuracy stat. The short is, no, an accuracy masterwork won't have any effect on the cold denial. Next question then, so do stability perks such as rapid hit affect the perfect draw window on bows? And Bungie say yes, anything that affects the stability stat on a bow will affect the perfect draw window. How was it for the weapons team to add subclass verbs like headstone, chill clip, and incandescent to weapons? Did you enjoy syncing the two more closely in gameplay and builds? And the team say subclass 3.0 verbs opened up a huge amount of design space for weapons. The perks we've already made are just the beginning. So that's a really, really exciting answer. I think incandescent, volt shot, chill clip, headstone, all those kind of things, they're probably some of the best perks in the game. Really, really looking forward to more coming from the team from Bungie. Well, next question, why does only a subset of exotic weapons tie into subclass 3.0? Well, we're not planning to tie every exotic into subclass 3.0 verbs, but over time we're going to add functionality to several of them, starting with those that are strongly themed around damage types. We're currently looking at Seasons 20 and 21 for passes on this, but we don't have anything more on this particular topic at this time. Are we going to be able to have multiple perks in each column on crafted weapons at some point in the future? And Bungie say, we're investigating this for a possible future release, but it's a more complicated task than it appears at first glance. Nothing in the immediate future, but we'll continue looking deeper into this. Then there's a question, so how do the extra perks on ritual rank resets actually work? Is there a cap to the benefit? Well, Bungie say we've got a formula that determines the maximum number of alternate perks based on the number of resets. For example, here's the formula for Valor, and then we have a whole bunch of math to determine the left column and the right column. But what I'm going to do is just skip to the description. So Bungie say what this means is the left column maximum perk count increases at first and third resets, and the right column increases at the second and fourth reset. The maximum possible is 3 perks in each column, with the actual number randomized between 1 and the current maximum. Okay, so next question. There's been a lot of discussion on perk drop rate recently. I really want to know if all the perks are truly weighted equally and randomized, or if a certain perk, i.e. newer ones, have drop priority. And Bungie say weapon perks are weighted equally under all circumstances. There are 0 cases in the game where one perk is more likely to roll than another. So very, very definitive statements there from Bungie. Next question. I've heard that you're reworking 20 exotic weapons in Season 19. Why so many? And Bungie say, we said we're touching 20 exotics, both buffs and nerfs, but the extent of that varies quite a bit. From the substantial rework, e.g. Lord of Wolves, to a small but impactful change, for example, the Legend of Acrius, there's a lot to cover, both big and small. Also, a small update on the number, 20 is out of date and it's now 26. So we always keep the list of under and overused exotics in mind, and decided to take on a big chunk of them in Season 19. Well, next up, what are the criteria for reprising Destiny 1 weapons in Destiny 2? So Bungie say it's important to note that it's impossible to simply copy and paste Destiny 1 content into Destiny 2. Because of engine changes and the significantly higher bar for art quality on current generation hardware, any Destiny 1 content has to be rebuilt from scratch. They're basically the same development cost as a brand new Destiny 2 weapon, with some exceptions. We believe players significantly prefer new content over reprise content. For raids, we always reprise an exotic weapon associated with a raid. We bring that into Destiny 2, and we select the 6 most popular legendary weapons and reprise those as well. One other thing, and this hasn't come up, but in the event that a raid didn't have an exotic, or that exotic has already come back, or there were fewer than 5 legendaries, we get to make new weapons to match the raid. So that's really, really exciting and something worth considering, with Wrath of the Machine potentially coming up and coming back in 2023. Well, next up, we've got some numbers. So the question is, why does Adagio have to be different on so many weapons? And Bungie say, well, actually it's not. Adagio is only branched 2 ways. specifically to prevent it from being too strong on bows. So one hit kills, getting a single bow kill is way too strong, and also shotguns. So bows plus shotguns is plus 20% damage, everything else is plus 30% damage, and note that because damage number rounding, it may be difficult for players to reverse engineer this in-game. Next question, so what does Zen Moment actually do? Well, each hit grants a stack, and that's max of 5 that lowers recoil, and reloading or not hitting for 1 second clears all the stacks. As for what it does, well, maximum stacks massively reduces recoil, so that is a very, very nice little explanation there of what Zen Moment does. In your opinion, would you use accuracy perks, e.g. firmly planted, on slug shotguns? By my testing, they seem to be very accurate by default, and I don't observe too much spread. And Bungie say slug shotguns are very accurate, so it's likely worth only using accuracy perks if you plan on using them while airborne or in other situations that reduces accuracy. Next question, what are the numbers on enhanced perks, and are there any guidelines or rules of thumb for all? Specifically, how much do the enhanced versions of Firmly Planted and Opening Shot give versus the base perks? Well, Bungie say the guidelines are that an enhanced perk should be 5 to 10% stronger than the base perk. We do exceed this in some cases, so here is an example of the enhanced versions. Enhanced Firmly Planted grants an additional plus 5 stability and plus 5 handling compared to the base perk. So Enhanced Opening Shot grants an additional plus 5 range and plus 5 aim assist compared to the base perk. Next question then, I am generally curious why One Choir Moment origin trait was created. What's the benefit of having increased reload outside of combat? And Bungie say the intended loop is to pause after an engagement to see whether you've got another enemy to deal with before reloading your weapons, because being caught mid-reload is bad news. This is something that doesn't really match everyone's playstyle though, so we're going to update this in Season 19. Next question, what is the minimum draw time on bows after the recent change? So minimum draw time is 500 milliseconds for lightweight frames and 540 milliseconds for precision frames, so weapon perks can reduce that even further. Well, next up we've got some fun little questions. So for the Australian audience here, so Neighbours or Home and Away, so they're soap operas, and the answer is Neighbours, and that is actually the correct answer, although Neighbours recently got cancelled, which is quite sad. So next up, this one is for the DCP community to shout out to the Destiny Community Podcast. When is the Nutbush emote coming to the game? And Bungie say, well, we've heard a rumour there may be a weird Australian-ish dance emote coming shortly after Lightfall. So I'm sure Miss 5000 Watts, Briar Rabbit, Tefty Teft, and also Mylin are going to be very, very excited about that. Next question then, when do we get truly Ocker perk names like Drongo, 2-Up, Rakoff or Struth? And Bungie say weapon names only so far, but there's a fair amount of those, and they're not accidental, such as the Taraba, Funnelweb, Redback, and Lunulata. So what favourite weapon perk combinations does the weapon team have? Chris Proctor says Perpetual Motion and Surrounded on sidearms and submachine guns. Brandon says Heating Up and Rampage on pulse rifles. Vivian says Stats for All and Reservoir Burst on fusion rifles. Alex, the intern, says Grave Robber and Golden Tricon on arc weapons for PvE. And Killing Wind and Rangefinder on submachine guns for PvP. Mercury says Moving Target in Perpetual Motion and Kill Clip on primary ammo weapons for PvP. George says Perpetual Motion and Killing Wind. I blame 90s arena shooters. And Taylor says Killing Wind and multi-kill clip. Next up, what replica weapon would each weapon designer want? So Chris Proctor says Dead Man's Tale. Brandon says Lorenz Driver. Vivian says Redacted Season 19 Solar Exotic Weapon. Very, very exciting stuff. Alex goes even further and says Redacted Lightfall Raid Exotic Weapon. But also Taraba is a close second. Mercury says Redacted Season 19 Kinetic Exotic Weapon. George says Redacted Season 18 Festival of the Lost Weapon. And Taylor there says Grid Skipper. So a couple of really interesting tidbits there. So we're getting 2 exotic weapons in Season 19. That is a Season 19 Solar Exotic Weapon and Season 19 Kinetic Exotic Weapon. And then also a Raid Exotic Weapon coming in Lightfall. So loads of new exotics coming to the game very, very soon. Next question. I'd be interested in looking at what the perks make God rolls on weapons. You know, what would be recommended for a scout rifle, submachine gun and pulse rifle? What works and why? So Mercules here says, depends a lot on the role of the weapon and what it's going to be. These roles can be broken up into some general areas. So PvE, regardless of the role, generally perks that increase damage, increase the magazine size, grant ammo, or improve reload speed. You know, they're prioritised for ad clear. yellow bar, champ killer and DPS weapons. For ad clearing, perks that trigger on final blows are great, like Rampage, Subsistence, Swashbuckler and Feeding Frenzy. Tanky, target and DPS, so you got perks that trigger neutrally or from dealing damage like Frenzy, Firing Line, Rapid Hit and Triple Tap. For PvP, two very different playstyles and perk preferences. So with dueling, perks that increase the consistency of the gun in 1v1 engagements, i.e. moving target, rangefinder, opening shot, Eye of the Storm. Kill chaining, so perks that provide a dramatic improvement to weapon performance after a kill, e.g. Kill Clip, Tunnel Vision, Killing Wind, and also Rampage 2. Next question, what is your opinion on Rangefinder drastically changing the effective engagement distances on weapons? So the zoom benefit already improves the damage fall-off and effective accuracy, but the aim assist fall-off increase. Well, that feels like a lot. We're going to be removing the added aim assist fall-off in the mid-season balance patch. The perk is ridiculously strong with just the zoom bonus and doesn't need to increase aim assist fall-off in addition to that. Next question, is someone going to fix the Fate of All Fools perk on Jade Rabbit? It's totally inconsistent and sometimes doesn't work at all. Yes, the perk was having similar issues with what was going on with Cranial Spike on Dead Man's Tail. The plan is to change it so that rapidly chaining precision hits, effectively the same trigger as Triple Tap, will make your next body shot deal the same damage as a crit, and you're going to be able to store up to 3 increased damage body shots at a time. So if you hit 9 crits quickly, you could follow that up and kill someone in PvP with 3 body shots. Basically, we want to reward accuracy and then make the gun easier to use instead of the other way round. Next question then, so how do you feel about Season 17 and Season 18 balance changes now? They've been out in the wild for a decent amount of time. Well, we think most of them landed pretty well, all things considered. High impacts, that's 150 RPM scout rifles, probably got over-buffed by a little bit. Auto rifles probably did not get buffed enough. And we've seen both precision frames, so that's 180 RPM scout rifles and handguns, come up in usage and effectiveness, which is great. What future balance changes should we be looking forward to? On Bungie say, in the mid-season balance pass, we're going to be making a number of changes to both under and overperforming archetypes, sizable stability bump for auto rifles and trace rifles, small buff to critical hit damage on adaptive frame pulse rifles and precision frame auto rifles, slightly reduced effective range of pulse rifles at low to mid stat values, nerfs to Jade Rabbit and no time to explain ease of use, continuation to the Lord of Walls rework, small rocket launcher blast radius buff, glaive damage resistance nerf, sidearm aim assist fall off buff, sniper flinch rework, and very small tweaks to submachine guns that are outperforming their intended ranges, a small decrease to high impact scout rifle damage, and some outliers that have zoom levels outside normal parameters are being brought back in line. So Risk Runner, PvP arc damage resistance reduction is, it's still going to remain ridiculous in PvE. And then in Season 19 we've got an additional list of changes we will be making, including removing some shotgun randomness, improved hit detection for glaives, reworking changing nearly 20 weapon perks, and reworking or changing over 20 exotic weapons. That's loads of changes there and loads of stuff to look forward to. Next question, do trace rifles have accuracy bloom as you hold down the trigger? And the simple answer is no. Is under pressure going to be nerfed on fusion rifles? And how are you finally going to rein in Zur's main ingredient without diminishing the precision frames as a whole? Well, Bungie say we're not going to be nerfing under pressure on fusion rifles. Most likely the thing we'll do, if main ingredient usage doesn't come down naturally, is lower its stats. This will allow us to avoid hitting all precision frame fusion rifles, and give other weapons in the subfamily room to breathe. That being said, precision frame fusion rifles as a subfamily outside of main ingredient are still very strong, and we're looking into them too. Are there any plans to add more subclass verbs to more exotics? And Bungie say lots of plans, nothing in concrete to share right now, but we're always on the lookout for places where we can add subclass verbs. We've got to be cautious, as some of the intrinsic functionality of the verbs may actually be worse than what is on the exotic weapon, or the uptime of the verb on the exotic weapon would cause severe balance issues with the subclass interaction. Next question, will skill-based matchmaking, Sbmm, being present in Control have any effect on the way we handle weapon balancing? And Bungie say we already use Survival and Trials as a more indicative game mode for balancing purposes. Survival has Sbmm and Trials has the Flawless pool that enables us to see what good players use and what is effective and what they are more likely to care about while winning. It will, however, allow us to see the different skill groups of players that generally avoid Survival or Trials and what they are effective with when they're not in skill pools that are mixed as Control used to be. So if skill-based matchmaking continues to roll out over time, it may give us the option to revisit weapon skill gaps. What are your plans for sniper rifle and special linear fusion rifles in terms of flinch? Well, for sniper rifle flinch, we've dramatically increased the time it takes for the reticle to reset back to the centre after taking damage, which in playlists has seen a marked decrease in the amount of times that players are able to shoot through that flinch, which also greatly decreased PvE flinch to counter that. We're not going to prevent players from trading with a sniper rifle on their first shot, nor will it hurt players using sniper rifles who disengage to allow the reticle to reset before peaking again, but this should hopefully address the instances of hitting someone using a sniper rifle with multiple crits only to get sniped through it. If this change plays out successfully in the game, outside of testing, we're going to try and migrate it over to the special LFRs. Any fusion rifle changes coming, like the rapid fire frame buff? Well, we want to see how the shotgun changes land before we rebuff rapid fire frames. The next question, what can be done to make Headseeker more interesting? Well, the plan is to increase the duration the perk is active, have the perk reset on body shots when it's already active, and have an increased aim assist by a very small amount in playtest. It's very, very good. Arguably one of the best neutral perks for pulse rifles. Do aggressive frames have high caliber rounds baked in? No. However, the flinch from a single shot is proportional to the damage, so high impact damage per bullet weapons will flinch more than low damage per bullet weapons. Dynamic sway reduction seems like one of the most misunderstood perks in the game. Can you explain a little bit about how it works? And Bungie say dynamic sway reduction starts working as soon as you start firing. Each subsequent shot improves its effects, so increasing accuracy and stability, until it maxes out around 20 shots. So high RPM weapons get maximum benefits more quickly than low RPM weapons. And the perk deactivates as soon as you stop firing. Next up, we've got what exactly does box breathing do? So after being ADS for 1.5 seconds without firing, box breathing increases the precision damage and multiplier of the weapon and increases the aim assist fall off distance by 10%, and it resets when you fire the weapon or leave ADS. Final question then, is there a way to estimate how much zoom decreases the effective cone angles? And Bungie say, on most weapons you can just divide the base cone angle by the zoom, e.g. 3 degrees base over 1.5x zoom, that is 2 degrees. So zoom reduces the size of both aim assist and accuracy cones, which means you're more accurate at higher zooms, but have a smaller aim assist radius. That being said, some weapons have additional scaling applied on top, like sniper rifles with aim assist. Well, that is it. Those are all the questions and the answers from Bungie. Really, really interesting stuff, and I hope you enjoyed that. I know it took quite a long time, and you are a trooper for making it through to the end. Well, let me know in the comments what you think of that Q&A format from Bungie. Personally, I really liked it. And that is it for this look at the weapons Q&A from Bungie in This Week at Bungie. And as always, thank you so much for watching or listening. For more Destiny 2 content like this, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. Or you can check me out on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you soon.